The problem really that you see in CX world is that the people in those teams, they don't talk business. They fail to connect their CX goals, so to speak, to the business goals. And when you talk to a CEO, he wants to know, how does it drive my top line and my bottom line? How does it reduce my costs? How does it contribute to the financials? And that is something CX people fail to do often. They cannot connect the business goals to the CX goals.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Your Customer, Your Success. My guest today is Kris Wauters. 6 years ago, Kris founded Gung-Ho, a consultancy built on deep expertise in customer experience, employee experience, and leadership development. Kris brings both the stars and the scars from over 30 years in senior leadership roles across sales and customer operations with global heavyweights like Cisco, Verizon, and Orange. Today, Kris works with organizations and individuals around the world to drive transformation, always with the employee and customer at the center. Kris views himself as more than a consultant. He's a coach, trainer, teacher, trusted sparring partner. He's a triple COPC certified CCXP. And most importantly, he sees himself as a lifelong student of the human experience. This is going to be quite the interesting conversation, Kris. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Gary. Thanks for having me.
You're quite welcome. How's the summer going in Brussels?
Well, sometimes it's sunny, sometimes it's raining. It's like real life.
It's like that's right. I think that's going to be the theme maybe for some of the discussions we have today. So I'm glad to talk to you, and I'm glad we're hitting yet another European country. So we're on our fourth country on Your Customer, Your Success. And I just looked up today. We've been listened to in over 20 countries so far. So I'm pretty proud of that.
Nice.
So welcome. So let's get right to it. I want to hop right into things today.
Sure.
You do a lot with transformation and change, and we're going to talk all about that great stuff. Let's get off with, what do you do first? When you're brought in to help a company transform, where do you begin? Strategy, insight, structure, people? How do you tackle it?
Well, always people first. If you look at strategy, culture has strategy for breakfast. So it really depends on the maturity level of the company, on the subject at hand, whether that's customer experience, employee experience, leadership, a organizational restructuring, technology. So the subject at hand, and you look at the maturity level of that company, and that gives you straight away what you need to look at next. But first things first, it's people. It's always around the people. I had a discussion with a senior leader the other day, and he asked me if I had experience with Microsoft Dynamics. That sure, I had. I came across it a couple of occasions, but what you need to know is that Microsoft Dynamics is just a out-of-the-box platform, and it's always been altered or modified for your specific business. So whatever I had experience with Microsoft Dynamics, it's irrelevant. The industry, it's irrelevant. You know what? It's about the people. They are unique in your organization. We hit it right on. So he got it.
No, I've used Microsoft Dynamics, and it's fine as a tool, but right, you've got to customize it and try to fit it into your company and your culture, and that's not always that easy. I've been through that. So tell us more about your process. I find this stuff fascinating. What's your process for helping companies build that integrated CX and EX strategy? Because I know that's a huge part of what you do, and one of the main reasons I wanted you on this show.
So when I go in, I take, let's say, 30 days observing, talking to as many people as possible, and that goes from the top dog to people on the floor. And I ask a lot of stupid questions. There's a lot of show me questions. Explain it to me like I'm a 6-year-old. Because well, I have a daughter of 9, but when she was 6, if I could explain stuff to her, or if you could explain stuff to her, chances were very high that I understood it as well. So explain it in dummy talk. Show it to me, tell it to me. So a lot of observation, analysis, And then I basically build a plan in the next 30 days where I keep having those conversations and observations, obviously. So I keep that ongoing all the time. I never isolate. I rarely work remote. I almost always work on site, on the floor, because that's where the action is, and that's where you see the human interactions at work. And then, once I have my plan, I defend the plan, get the funding, get green lights. I do not wait for approval to implement already low-hanging fruit. So when you go into the boardroom and you explain your plan, and you ask for the money or the people or whatever you need, you can already show some possibly early results, or at least potential. So I really follow that 30-30-30 process. Sometimes it takes me only 10 days to build a plan. It really depends on what is the complexity of the project. So once that is done, and integrating a CX or an EX strategy, there is two approaches into it. One is what I call the English garden. The other one is the French garden. So the English garden is very organic. You start small. You start with, some insights, with getting some people on board, preferably the leadership, obviously, but people around. It starts small, and it grows organically into a beautiful garden. A French garden takes a lot of planning up front. And it takes a rigorous program, so to speak, but then you roll it out in one big bang. So there's those two approaches to integration. Yeah.
That I love it. That's great. That is a great analogy. And I love the 6-year-old analogy. I do the same kind of thing. There was a TV show here in the 90s called Mad About You with the comedian Paul Reiser and Helen Hunt before she got famous. And there was a scene in there where he said to Helen Hunt played his wife in the show, he'd say, "Honey, talk to me like I'm 4." Right. And I say that all the time when somebody's confusing me, or my wife is upset about something, like, slow down, talk to me like I'm 4. Like, give it to me straight and keep it basic. But on a serious note, I've seen that in my career, where my colleagues will talk to a client like the client's worked at the company for 20 years, like they have, right?
Mm-hmm.
You've got to speak to them so they can understand it. Know your audience. Same thing as podcasting or a stand-up comedian. We got to know your client, know who you're speaking to, because they haven't been an accountant at the company like you've been for 20 years. So you've got to get rid of the acronyms and the technical speak and get it down so somebody who hasn't done your job for 20 years understands what you're saying. So that's correct. A really cool approach.
Yep.
All right.
On the other hand, when you present your plan in the boardroom, it helps if you can throw in a couple of those acronyms. It gives them the feeling that you understand their business, that you've been part of that industry or that business for a very long time, and it helps to build trust as well. So it doesn't hurt to know the jargon very early on and use a couple of those words.
Oh yeah, going the other way. You to the company, right? Perfect.
Yeah.
But right, you to the company to you, or the company to a client, right? You've got to talk in more simple terms.
Absolutely.
So that is a great point. Yeah, interesting point. All right, so I love the approach. So let's get into some examples, because I always kind of like to go approach, examples, things like that. Can you give us a moment from your client work where everything just clicked? There was this kind of like true aha moment in the CX transformation.
Well, honestly, you want to have that moment as early as possible. Preferably even at intake conversations, so before you even sign on, so to speak, because it means that what you're talking about makes sense, that you connect, that you have them on board. So I go look for that aha moment as soon as possible. And again, I don't wait for presenting the plan in the boardroom. It's with discussions with the senior leaders or senior leadership even before we sign the contract, where I poke them a little bit with insights, and I try to understand at what level of maturity or knowledge they are. I adapt, and then I give them little things, and mostly I bring it with a story. Storytelling, and I think you done an episode on that.
Andrew Carruthers. Yeah.
Yeah,
Hat
I
tip Andrew.
loved it. And well, it's a crucial skill in our profession, storytelling. So I evoke that aha moment with a simple story that talks to them, that connects, and then off you go. So I go look for that aha moment as soon as possible. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now,
No, great stuff.
the, the problem really that you see in CX world and in EX world, it's no different, is that the people in those teams, in those departments, they don't talk business. They fail to connect their CX goals, so to speak, to the business goals. And when you talk to a CEO, he doesn't care about customer satisfaction or NPS or whatever metrics CX people use. Um, he wants to know, how does it drive my top line and my bottom line? How does it reduce my costs? How does it contribute to the financials? And that is something CX people fail to do often. They cannot connect the business goals to the CX goals. Did you know, by the way, that in CX departments there are the percentage of burnouts is the highest? And
Really?
I'm talking CX in a very broad sense. That customer support, customer facing people, up and
Hmm.
including sales, the level of burnouts is the highest there, simply because they feel not understood by the rest of the organization, simply because they're failing to connect their goals to the overall business goals. So that is something I'm pretty eminent about. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that is a great point and an interesting point, and that's exactly it. Sometimes oftentimes I should say, the rest of the organization fails to understand what a client team or CX team is doing, and it becomes imperative on that team to do what you said, speak to the rest of the teams on their terms and in their goals,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because you could take all the surveys you want, but so what? Right. And so the connecting the two, connecting the dots becomes your role, like it or not, fair or not.
Yeah.
And that's a great point. As a matter of fact, I already put a star down there for a great point. We hit the leaders, right? I want to keep going on that vein. What is one thing most leaders overlook when leading a change? Or is there like a common misconception that you think executives have about experience transformation?
Yeah. Yeah. Um, Most executives think change is about technology. It's not. And what happens a lot, really, really a lot, is there is a new technology platform, whatever chosen, whether it be an ERP or a CRM or whatever,
Hmm.
and that gets implemented, and people get some training, for example, and then they go, this isn't working as we thought it would work. People are reluctant to change. No, you approached it completely wrong. And honestly, 99% of the cases in any transformation program, the technology is at the core of the program, and it shouldn't be. What should be at the core of your program is the customer satisfaction or the customer experience, let's say, or the employee experience. What is your desired outcome? How do you want your customers or your employees to feel? What do you want them to take with them? How do you want, as a brand, to be remembered by your customers or your employee? So start with designing the experience you want them to have. then translate that experience into your business processes. And you will find often that your business processes are not supporting what you actually want your customer experience to be. So once you figure that out, then choose the technology that can support your business processes, not the other way around. Because then they go, this doesn't work anymore. We have to change our business processes, and then nobody thinks about the customer experience that will follow. So a lot of transformation programs just got it backwards. That's it. And then you come in, and then you have to fix that.
Right. And there's nothing worse than you making a technology change that impacts your clients and your customers, and they have to change something.
Exactly.
Or do work.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Correct.
How much work? And I've spent a lot of time doing that, where we've implemented platform changes, things like that, and it impacts the clients tremendously. And that is not an easy conversation. And you got to say, well, it's in your best interest in the long run and all this kind of stuff. But no, in the short run, you're making them do work, and it can be very frustrating depending on what you're doing. So that's a great point. So we've talked, and you have quite the specialty in change and change management. And we've talked about that on this show. What I want to get from you is, how do you overcome, there's this change fatigue a lot in organizations, right? Because it's always change all the time. You got to change, you got to adapt, you got to grow. Great, I understand that. But how do you overcome change fatigue in an organization that's been through all sorts of transformation cycles, right? Because it just feels like it never stops, I think, a lot in some organizations, especially the big organizations like you've worked with.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, people need to understand that change is constant. If you don't change, you're dead, literally, because then you don't change anymore. But where does fatigue come from? That is because the change has been implemented backwards, or really poor. It's really in the correct order of change on the people side that makes the difference. So overcoming change fatigue is actually rather easy, so to speak. Because if there is change fatigue, it means that all the change that people have been gone through has been implemented wrong. You do it right, and they see straight away. They see the difference. It is starting with explaining to people why you want the change to happen, and what are you going to change, and why are you doing it. That's the very first thing. Making people that understand. And they don't necessarily need to agree straight away, but they need to understand. They need to understand why, from a business perspective, from a human perspective, from a technology perspective, whatever it is, why are we implementing this change? Secondly, you have to get them on board, right? And I'll share a little story later on that really illustrates that. So getting them on board is answering to two questions. What's in it for me? And how is my team, me and my team, how are we going to get better from it? So that's the relatively easy part. It also means that you bring people into the test room, so to speak, or in the development room as early as possible, not at the end of your waterfall project. In Agile, it's a little bit different, but you bring them in to look at what is going to change, how it's going to look like, how do they need to adapt, and how they can get better out of it or not. So they can early on into the project, they can object, and then you start working on those objections. So and then the rest is training and reinforcement. So the process, so to speak, is rather easy. Overcoming change fatigue is easy because then you know that has been done wrong. You do it right, and you get people on board relatively easy. Specifically, your target audience is not the leadership team, let's say, is the first line managers. Those guys are always between the rock and the hard place. You get them on board, you get the floor on board, and you get the senior leadership on board as well. So your key stakeholders, so to speak, are the first line managers. Now,
wow.
Just a little story on this change aspect. So there was a um, insurance company. It was in the Netherlands, and they grew organically out of one village. So 80-90% of the village was employed by that insurance company. And at
Oh
some
boy.
point, so that was really, can't name the name of the company, but it was, the company was the village, period. At a certain point, the board decided that they needed to relocate to, let's say, demonstrate their more nationwide presence. So they grew from a very small local insurance company to really a big one. So they needed to move closer to the capital. And the capital was only 25 kilometers away. So it's not the end of the world. Um, but that evoked a large change program, because you can imagine, if you work in your village or you have to work 25 kilometers away, that changes your life. So we had a lot of pushback from the people, and we needed to understand where does it come from and how can we fix it. And one of the things that we've implemented is that, look, we don't want everybody to go buy a car and drive the 25 kilometers. So what we will do, we'll have a bus that drives from the village to the office and back in the evening. And we want everybody on the bus. That was our motto: everybody on the bus. And then we started, with the senior leader, who had his own luxury car with driver. So for him, it was not a problem. But we said,
No.
you know what? You need to be on the bus too. And he was very reluctant, very, very reluctant, I can imagine. He said, yeah, but you know what? In my car, when I'm driven, I can work at the same time. And he said, you know what? One of the responsibilities of your work is connecting with your people. You can do that on the bus, Eventually, it clicked with him, and he said, "You know what? I'm going to do this for 6 months. I agree. I am going on the bus." And we worked with everybody in the company really to get them on the bus, and we got pushback. Like, for example, yeah, well, you know what? That's all good and well that you have a bus at 9 o'clock, but daycare starts at 8:30. So I have to drop off my kid. At 9:30. I have to drop off my kid at 9:30, but then the bus has left already. Okay, yeah. You know what? That is something we can fix. We can have 3 buses: 8:30, 9:30. Problem solved. Another bunch of people on the bus. But there are also things that you cannot fix. There was one that says, you know what? I go 2 to 3 times a day. I go home to walk the dog. I said, look, we're not gonna, invest in a dog walking service. Sorry, can't help you. You lose some of them. So, but just to give you the idea, we wanted to have that pushback, to have that resistance as early as possible, and then you look for simple solutions to solve that resistance. Bam, you have the people on the bus. In the end, we got 95-96% of the people on the bus that relocated. It was a huge success. But you have to explain people why, what's in it for you, how can we help you to overcome resistance, and the rest is just training and knowledge. That's it, and abilities, obviously.
I love it. I love it. I love that story. That is fabulous. I had a couple follow-up questions before you got to the story, but that is so good. I'm going to let that sit. What I like about it most, though, is the objections. You have the objections. I've felt a lot of time, and part of the problem with change and change management, you're not allowed to object, or you're not on the bus, literally, right? You can't object. Hey, everything's going to be great. Everything's great. Well, no, wait. I've got a concern with my client. My client is a large client. They might go out to bid if they don't like this.
Yeah.
And you're not, you don't accept that pushback. And I think it's essential because you're doing it in the interest of the company to say, wait, this might not work. So that letting the objections come out, I think, is huge.
Man,
let people get it out and address it.
I'm looking to get that objections out as soon as possible. I evoke it, because objections basically gives you something to work with. If you don't get the objections, you're unaware. You don't know what's happening, and then all you're doing is playing with emotions. That's pointless. You have to be able
And
to
right.
action it and do something with it.
And
Yeah.
but that's what erodes the trust, right? It's this isn't a good change. You're not looking out for me. It's not in my best interest. What do I want this change for? And there you
Yeah.
go. A fascinating example. So thank you for that. Let's move a little bit to coaching because you're a coach.
Yeah.
How do you coach leaders who are passionate about results but might be a little disconnected from people or the CX thing because it's maybe they just think it's people with surveys and NPS scores and things like that. So talk to us a little bit about how you approach the coaching aspect.
Okay. Um, First of all, I do a quick assessment on where the leader sits on the axis of consciousness and agreeableness, right? So you have people that are high on consciousness and low on agreeableness. Those are the real pieces of work, right? I'll dig into it later. The other way around, high on agreeableness, low on consciousness. You have to teach them because they don't know. Huh? But if I come against and unfortunately there are dark tetrad types, and I'll explain straight away because it might be a term that not everybody knows. Then I walk. I ignore them. There's nothing I can do. I walk away. Dark tetrad people are people that display one or more of the four personality traits. Machiavellism, and I'll explain a bit what that exactly means. Machiavellism is people that are very manipulative. They are very strategic thinkers, but they're focused on self-interest at the expense of others. So Machiavellism, narcissism, which is people that have a grandiose sense of self-importance. They need to be admired, and they have a total lack of empathy. We're coming back to empathy later. Psychopathy is the third trait. So psychopaths. Then there is this misconception that all psychopaths are serial killers. That's not correct. All serial killers are psychopaths, however. So psychopathy is also this lack of empathy. They're very impulsive, and they have a tendency towards antisocial behavior. So those three are what we call the dark triad. And then there's a fourth added to it that makes it a dark tetrad. It's sadism. Sadism is deriving pleasure from the suffering of others or inflicting suffering or pain to others, physically or physiology. So that's the dark tetrad. There is about 5% of the population that have high levels of one of or more of those four traits, right? And not surprisingly, in top leadership positions, that percentage is slightly higher. And in a sense, you have to have some of these traits to a certain extent. Okay, you can't be a full narcissist, but you have to have, a little bit, self-love. You don't have to be Machiavellian, but you have to be a strategic thinker. Okay, so the top level, let's say, tends to display some degree of one or four, three, because sadism, then you're out. One of those three character traits. But if they're full-blown Machiavellian or a narcissist, I walk. There's nothing I can do with those people, right? So, but that let's say those character traits, they are sometimes necessary. I bet you never met a CEO that is a total pushover. Of course not. Those people, right. They have to be strong. They have to be strong. They have to have strong opinion. They have to have self-love or a bit of egoism. There is no CEO in the world that is not interested in his own career advancement. None of them, right? So they have to have some of that behavior, but it can't be pathological. If it's pathological, I walk. But that means that you have, let's say, 95 to 90% of the leaders you're working with that have some of those traits, or to a lesser extent, obviously, and there you can work with. Often, those leaders are, that are somewhat disconnected from people, as you said. They're often referred to as toxic leaders. That is wrong. There is no such thing as toxic leadership, except for the dark tetrad. And remember, it's about let's say, top 10% of the senior leaders that are dark tetrad. But that means that 90 to 95% of those leaders that are that have the label as toxic leaders, they're not toxic, they're incompetent. There's a huge difference. And with incompetence, you can work around. Is it a lack of self-awareness, or a lack of awareness of others? Is it a lack of empathy? And by the way, most people have, to some degree or to a high degree, they have, let's say, built-in empathy. Empathy is being able to feel what the other feels. There are, however, people that do not feel it. I'm one of them, all right? I do not feel anything of the emotions of another. However, I've been socially correctly instructed and corrected up to the age of 6, let's say. There are a lot of children that lack natural empathy. If they're not socially corrected by the age of 6, tops 7, chances are very high that they end up in the dark tetrad area. But I was socially corrected and socially reprogrammed, so to speak, and I replaced that natural empathy with cognitive empathy. So I am very, very empathic, but not naturally. I am very empathic on a cognitive level. Okay, so is that maybe a problem with that specific leader? So those are things that are labeled as toxic leadership. It's just incompetence. You have to find out what and then work on it. So that's basically my approach on coaching leadership that are disconnected from people, as you said it. Yeah.
That is the most interesting take on it I've ever heard. That is absolutely fabulous. Wow. So I'm going to leave that one right there too, because that is so fascinating. We've got time for one more question before we hit the segment. So we're going to kind of try to wrap this up. So given all that, have you ever had to deliver kind of the tough truth to the leadership team? They weren't ready to hear it, right? So that's a very different approach. Have you seen a leader now turn the style around and become more customer employee centric because of that approach? Can you give us an example, I guess is what I'm asking you?
Sure. There's one that springs to mind immediately. So I had a senior leader, and he experienced trouble, let's say, with conveying a message. He said, when I do town halls or even team meetings or whatever, people tend to see me as the enemy. They don't accept my message, and I generally mean what I say. I'm not a fake person. I just, there's something wrong there. I figured it out soon enough. But that was such a harsh message to give that I chose a different approach. And I used hippotherapy, with this one, so that I work with horses. And I confronted him with a horse, and he was afraid of it. And I can understand that. Those are big, powerful creatures, and I can understand that some people have fear of them or are afraid of them. So that's fine, and actually that helped me. And I asked him, "Can you do a tour around the corral? Not mounted, I just put a holster and a cord on the horse, and said, just take the cord and do a tour around the corral." He was a bit reluctant because of his fear, but he took it anyway, which was exactly what was his problem, but he only didn't realize it yet. And the horse refused. It didn't want to go along, so he yanked the cord, and eventually they did a tour and with a couple of stops. And then, I talked him through it. Said, look, you're afraid of horses, aren't you? He said, yeah, I'm terrified, but I'm doing it anyway. I said, well, thank you for admitting that. I saw it straight away, but you had to go through the experience, to come clean with me. And that's exactly what's happening with your team. You have been programmed, let's say, to be the boss leader, the man that knows everything, the man that is strong, the man that is always on the forefront, the man that everybody can rely on. That's in your DNA. It was a man in his 60s, so an older generation, let's say. He was brought up that He was brought up that way. He couldn't help it. I said, look, why don't you admit to the horse instead of to me that you're afraid of it? And he did. And he went to the horse, and his shoulders shrugged a little bit, and he was suddenly a bit less tall. And he told the horse, I'm afraid of you, blah, blah, blah. I said, oh, stop. What you're doing right now is whining like a 4-year-old. And you know what the 6-year-old does when he sees the 4-year-old whining like you're doing now? He goes, wrong. You don't admit your vulnerability like this. You can be humble with confidence. There's a big difference between saying to the horse, I'm a little bit afraid of you. No, you can, straight up and go to the horse and say, look, buddy, I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm actually a little bit afraid of horses, but yet I'm trying to execute what I've been told, what I've been asked. But I need your help. You have to help me through this. Can you at least try to trust me? So that is confidence in your being humble. That is confidence in your admitting that you don't know everything. You did that, walked 2 tours around the corral just with 2 fingers on the cord. And it was a life-changing experience for him. We worked another hour afterwards in how to bring that to your teams and how to connect with people through being humble yet confident. End of session. Send him home. Call him up about a month or 2 later, and you have to know the man was in tears. It broke him. It broke him. Yeah, he was raised that way. He was programmed for 60 years to be the tough guy. And then now all of a sudden he has to admit that he's human, that he is vulnerable, with confidence obviously, but you can see it broke him. And he was in tears. But afterwards, he went back to the company. I called him up 2 months after. Said, "Hey man, how are you doing? Not what's up, but how are you doing?" And he said, Kris, I'm doing great. This was really, really hard for me. I still have difficulties with doing this. I practice it a lot. It's really difficult to throw overboard what you've been doing for at least 60 years. But I'm trying, and I see results. I said, hey, cool. Can I come have a look? Can I attend a team meeting or anything? Man, you cannot believe it. I attended a team meeting before we started the session, and I attended 2 months after this team meeting. It was a world of difference. There was no more hostility. There was no more little turf wars. People were open. They were not sitting in a meeting room like this, held back in fear almost.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, they had open conversations. They were not afraid to speak their mind respectfully. So it changed them. Yeah. So yeah, I delivered hard messages to senior leader. With this one, I used a horse to be the mirror of his soul.
That is absolutely fascinating. That is a terrific story. But the fact that, yeah, you have to confront these people with strong personalities and egos to actually make a difference. I
Yeah.
think is the fascinating part. Rather than, I think a lot of times people might try to coach by appeasing them, and okay,
Mm,
they're kind of a senior leader, and I don't want to ruffle any feathers, and I'm going to help them. But if you really need to transform somebody, you really need to break it down. That is
yeah.
super interesting. And it also goes into a little bit what we talked about a couple episodes about the villainizing and villain traps, because once you start that adversarial relationship, you start to villainize each other, and we're not on the same page, and we don't have the same goals, and this guy's not in it for us, he's in it for him, and then he gets that kind of feeling about, geez, I'm not winning over this audience,
Yeah.
and it becomes a little adversarial. That is super fascinating stuff. Awesome, Kris.
Yeah.
All right, we need to move to the segments. I'd love to keep talking, but we've got to move on to the segments.
Sure.
All right, it is time for Does It Hold Water, my favorite segment. This is where I ask my guests to be our expert witness for the day. I ask them a question. They have no idea what I'm going to ask them, but it does play into their strengths and their expertise. And they're going to let me know if it holds water, or what's, maybe some of it's right, some of it's wrong, but we're gonna see what Kris thinks about this. Now, I'm repeating a question for the first time, not because I'm lazy, but because I thought about it, and I said this might really be an interesting one to ask Kris, given his view of the world. Okay, so you ready, Kris? Here we
Sure.
go. Your question, your quote actually comes from Dario Amodei, the CEO of Anthropic.
Hmm.
He's obviously one of the most famous people in the world of AI. And recently he sounded the alarm about the crisis in an interview with Axios. And he said, AI could wipe out half of all entry level white collar jobs and spike unemployment to 10 to 20% in the next 1 to 5 years. Now, we was talking about the US, of course, but the theme is the same. So, what do you think of that quote from an AI leader?
Hmm. Um, well, first of all, you have to know I'm European. Um, we are not as politically correct as US citizens. So, that being said, I believe that's horseshit. Honestly, um,
Yeah.
AI is just another change we're going through. Sure, we will need to learn to adapt, and sure, it will have impact on some jobs. And I'm convinced that some jobs will disappear. But it will create other jobs. Look, 200 years ago, before we discovered petrol, specifically in the US, whale oil was the source of fuel, or fossil fuel, and you had a lot of whale hunters, or seamen that sailed whale hunter ships. We don't have sail hunters anymore, or hardly any. So because we discovered petrol, and we learned to refine it and to use it as the fossil fuel still around, the demand for whale oil declined massively. Was it the end of the world? No, it was just change. It's the same with the automobile. When Mercedes Benz invented the automobile, or Ford, you can take your pick. Um, Everybody was just using horse and carriage. You hardly see any horse and carriage anymore. So that means that the carriage makers, they're out of a job. Yeah, so there are other jobs that were created. You have a car mechanic now. So AI, it will have an impact on how we do things. Is it going to be the end of the world? Is it going to be that dramatic? I don't think so. We will make mistakes in using that technology for sure, like we did with any possible or imaginable technology. But we will learn from it. I mean, that makes us human. We learn from our mistakes. Sometimes we make the same mistake a couple of times, but eventually we learn, and we adapt. So, no, BS as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, it does not hold water.
Nope.
I tend to agree. I think it's a little overstated for sure, and I think it could be a little self-serving as well, as the
Yeah,
CEO of an
yeah,
AI company,
of course.
building up the hype. There's too much hype, and again, we are very technology aware is the term I like to use on this show. And we've talked about the AI hype, and it is a little bit overboard, if you
Yeah,
ask me.
yeah.
So I like to just keep reminding people of what the proper mindset is when it comes to these things. So that was a great one. Thank you, Kris.
You're welcome.
Okay, it is time for chip shots. Chip shots are my fun yet shorter form, they're still professional, but a little bit more personal questions.
Mhm.
We try to go with 3 or 4 time permitting. And I always start with the book one. Everybody loves the book question. We got a great book list going. What is one book that has significantly influenced you in your your professional or personal life?
Yeah, I kind of knew this one was coming. It's a classic, and I get asked a lot. Now, when I recommend a book to someone, it's always personal and it's let's say tailor made. But since we're doing this for a larger audience, I've got a couple of them. First of all, is this little baby Gung-Ho, which is, by the way, the name of my company, if you remember well. I got this one back in 2002. It changed my life dramatically. It's a story about a very tough lady manager. It's more in the industrial age, let's say. But then she comes and she has difficulties with leading change, let's say. And then she comes in contact with a Native American, or someone at least with roots as a Native American, and he talks her through this methodology that is beautifully written in novel form. It changed my life. I tended to loan it to people. At a certain point, I stopped because it became all scruffy. It came back with
I was gonna say
with coffee stains. But
that book is worked in.
yeah, but I did get great gifts back. Like for example, this little postcard from a Spanish lady I worked with in Amman in Jordan. So I got these little nuggets of gold back, but eventually I just bought a big box of the hardcover and I just hand them over to people right now. Okay, so Gung-Ho is definitely one I would recommend. Second one is Start with Why by Simon Sinek. I had the privilege of working with him before he got famous.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but this guy changed the world. That we talk about our purpose in life. He actually introduced your why. So he changed the world that dramatically that it changed the English vocabulary. We hardly ever talk about purpose. We talk about our why. That's Simon. So and when you read it, you might as well buy the follow-up book, Find Your Own Why. Find your own purpose. I know which one is mine. So those two I would definitely recommend. Now I've studied psychology throughout my career. So simultaneously, career, building a house, and studying psychology. I worked my way through puppies like this. The William James contribution to psychology. It's required leading for any psychologist. Obviously, I worked my way through Jung, Carl Gustav Jung, the archetypes. Big books. I would not recommend them at all if you're not interested knee deep into psychology. I do, however, recommend a very nice summary of the main archetypes by Carl Gustav Jung. This book comes from the Routledge series. They brought out a whole series of books to help people understand a bit more complex givens, let's say, and it takes you to the archetypes: the mother, the rebirth, the spirit, and the trickster, which are the main types. It's very nicely written. It's very understandable. If you're interested in, let's say, the basics of psychology or modern psychology, I would definitely recommend this one. Another one is also written by a psychologist. It's Dr. Thomas Eriksson. It's a Swedish psychologist. and the book is called Surrounded by Idiots. Actually, Dr. Erickson is the founder of the Insights model. You may have come across with it, but the Insights model, it's also based on the archetypes of Jung, but it makes it workable, it makes it understandable, it's dummy proof. This is a great book. I would recommend it to anyone. I'm a big fan of the model, by the way. And did you know that in Scandinavia, so Norway, Sweden, Denmark, Finland, there are more copies sold of this book than there are inhabitants. So in
What?
yeah,
Really?
absolutely. So this model, it's a big success in Europe. I don't know how it is in the US, but in Europe, let's say at least half of the companies have gone through some form of training around this model, and it comes with a couple of pitfalls. But it's great to understand that there are people that are different than you. To not only understand it, recognize it, and play to it. Adapt your communication style to hit with the other. It's a great model. I love it. So definitely recommend this one. And then last but not least, and then I'm gonna stop with the books. Was a life changer for me as well. We talked about storytelling, right? Storytelling being so important in our profession. And then I came across this one, Maps of Meaning by Dr. Jordan B. Peterson. And where he takes us from modern neuropsychology to ancient stories, biblical stories, or even before that, the Sumerian stories for that matter. He also talks about Jung, obviously, Nietzsche, Dostoevsky, Solzhenitsyn, all authors I've read, but he summarizes it that great. Maps of Meaning by Dr. Jordan B. Peterson. I think he has the lectures in podcast form, or at least it's available on YouTube for the ones that cannot devour this big heavy beast. So that's it. We started with Gung-Ho. We ended up with Jordan Peterson. Yeah.
So I was going to say we got 2 for 1 or 3 for 1, and then you just kept going. So I lost track at about 7 books, but we will put them all in the show notes, everyone. So they will be below in the show notes, listed, duly noted. That is absolutely fabulous, and you did the audience a great service by listing all of those. That is great stuff. I don't even know where to begin with those. So take your pick, because there was a wide variety in there, folks. If you're into psychology, you're not into psychology, wow. Great stuff. Thank you.
Welcome.
Okay. We got to keep rolling. One habit or routine you've cultivated through the years that you believe contributes to your personal or professional success.
That's actually an easy one. I learned to listen. I as you can tell, I have no difficulties in talking. It's easy for me. Listening is difficult for me. And true listening, the definition I give it of true listening is without the intent to answer. You have to try that one day. It's unbelievably difficult, because our brain is so wired. Oh yeah, I know this. Oh, I can answer this, and we interrupt people even. So that means that we're not listening at all. I learned to truly listen. I can hold for a minute already, which is hard work. Shut down your answer brain and only listen. That is really hard work. So that's the one thing I've learned. It's a habit I developed. Let's say listening skills.
Certainly I'm it's something I've been told is one of my strengths. I'm a client manager over there. You have to stop and listen to your clients always, and really listen to what they're saying, and think ahead of them, and even be a little bit part of a psychologist when you do it. But it's certainly a good trait for a podcast host too, because I need to know when to keep my mouth shut and just let you interesting people take over and tell us what we need to know. So I'm always torn between, adding stuff and then just letting it go. So which is why a lot of the stuff you're coming at us with today is so fabulous. I'm just letting it all go, because you're doing such a great job with it. Okay, let's move on to a piece. I'm sorry. Is there a particular experience or failure early in your career that taught you a valuable lesson?
Yes. The lesson I've learned is I never fail. Literally, I never fail. I either win, I either learn. I don't give up. I never give up. I never quit, but I learned when to walk away. So yeah, the lesson is I never fail. Failure is it's not in my vocabulary anymore. Either I win, either I
Mm-hmm.
learn. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So
Well, I'm glad you said that because I have an interesting prop for you. And sorry if you're listening on audio. This is a T-shirt from my children's baseball coach, and if you see
mhm.
here, it says "Win or
Win
learn,"
or learn.
and that's it. That is his motto: "You win or you learn, and you only lose if you quit." And
Yeah.
so, hat tip to Coach Joel Barrett, if he's listening. They just went to camp today, and he preaches that every day at camp. Fantastic coach, but that is what he teaches to the kids, the exact same thing. So I was floored when I heard you say that. So great stuff.
Cool.
Okay, we've got to wrap it up. This has been such an interesting conversation, but we only have time for one more. I'm going to go with the advice question. I haven't asked that in a while. I'm just going to throw it in there. It's more of a generic question, but I'm going to say, what's the best piece of leadership advice you've ever received, and how has it shaped your approach?
It's a piece of advice I received. Let's see, about 20 years ago. I'm as you can tell, I'm very talkative. I'm a tall guy. I'm in meters and centimeters. I'm 188. So that's pretty tall. I'm a big boy, let's say. So I can be intimidating just by my posture alone. I can be intimidating to people. In addition to that, I'm always on the forefront. I'm always fighting. I'm always pushing. In the surrounded by idiots. I'm the red guy. I'm extremely red. And the piece of advice I got, and it really made me think, and it had to resonate. It kind of hurt a bit. Was Kris, you don't have to be Conan the Barbarian. On top of the barricades, swinging your big sword, always in the forefront of the battle. The invincible guy. You don't have to be that guy. Sometimes you could be a little bit more to play Inspector Columbo. Inspector Columbo, right? Peter Falk.
Oh, of course. Yeah. Peter Falk.
Yeah, asking the stupid questions like, "Come to think of it, can you help me with this? I forgot." Sir, my wife. So, asking the dumb questions. I don't have to be Conan the Barbarian. So yeah, that kind of stuck. Yeah.
Yeah, that is interesting, and I will not do neither a Peter Falk or an Arnold Schwarzenegger imitation on the show because I might lose the audience. But that's a great one. That is a great analogy. Kris Wauters, you've been an unbelievably fascinating guest. Thank you so much for your time today. Why don't you let the audience know where they can find you?
Well, you can find me on LinkedIn, obviously, but you can also find me through our website, which we will put below in the description. So that's gung-ho.be. And then again, we will also add my phone number. I'm not the email kind of guy. You have a question, you want to talk to me, just give me a call.
I love that. Old school, but it works, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, we're missing that. People don't just call each other enough anymore.
Yep.
You have to set up meetings and get on calendars and go to Calendly and book a meeting. Whatever happens, just pick up the phone and call me because we'll be done in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
We don't have to wait till 2 weeks from next Thursday.
Exactly.
So,
yeah.
All right. There's my piece of leadership advice for this show. Pick up the phone more, people, and call each other.
Absolutely.
Gosh. Yeah. All right. Kris, we got to go. Thank you so much again. Everybody, we'll be back real soon on your customer success with more CX leaders, customer success leaders, maybe even some investment folks as well. So thank you for joining us today, and we'll be back real soon. Bye for now. That's a wrap. Thank you so much for tuning in today. We hope you found something insightful that will enhance your experiences and drive your success. If you enjoyed the episode, please leave a review and share your thoughts to help us improve the show. Don't forget to head on over to marracxhub.com for more ways to connect with me and learn more about experience management. Until next time, I'm Gary Marra, working hard for your customer and your success.